section now looking at health and safety, or work health and safety in the timber products and furniture industry for the preliminary industry study. In this section, there's a whole heap of stuff around signage, principles and requirements, PPE, safe work practices, first aid, materials handling. There's a lot of crossover to our construction course here, so I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm aware that students watching this are also our construction students as well, so I don't want to have too much crossover. You also need to be aware that you need to be able to identify the health and safety factors that make businesses safe. So we get started with, there is a legal requirement. It comes under the 2011 Work Health and Safety Act that employers and businesses have a legal requirement, a duty of care to keep their people safe. The way they do this is by assessing risks and managing risks. They're the two most basic principles of the health and safety legislation. Employers are obliged to ensure the health and safety. In 2011, when this law was introduced, it also meant that things like bullying in the workplace and mental health issues has been included under the health and safety legislation. So it's important to be aware that all of those elements of mental health issues associated with work have also been covered in the Health and Safety Act. So you have an obligation as an employer to ensure the well-being of your employees. Now you can see that these are an update from 2001 legislation, but they've also been updated again. Now, our syllabus hasn't updated to the new versions yet, but you can see the Work Health and Safety Regulation from 2011 is now a 2017 version. The Act says you need to keep people safe. The regulation says this is how you keep people safe. So the regulation is how you apply the laws. The PCBU, or the person in charge of the business, has the responsibility to do everything reasonably practical to keep people safe. But it also has very clearly written in the law that employees must also do everything reasonably practical to keep themselves safe and to notify their boss if there's any hazards that they identify. There are safe working practices, safe operating procedures. There's a whole heap of different terminologies used here, but safe working practices are the practices or the way that work is done to make sure that people are kept safe. And when we're working in the industry, there are pretty clear procedures on how to pick materials up and carry them around, how to sand materials to keep yourself safe, how to use machines to keep yourself safe. These are all considered safe working practices. And it generally comes with formal training or on-the-job training on how to use each individual tool and equipment safe. If we think safe work practices, think your on-guard training. You're given a theoretical introduction to the safe work practices for each piece of machinery. Then you go into the workshop, your teacher gives you a demonstration on how to keep yourself safe with that, demonstrating those safe work practices, and then they observe you working safely in that three-part sign-off of your on-guard safety. First aid is another important part of that, and the legislation says that all businesses must have first aid kits and that green and white signage is used for those, and they need to be stocked. Fairly basic things here. You should know about safety data sheets, but these are documents. There's one for each material, each chemical you'd be familiar with, that tell us how dangerous the chemical is, how to handle it properly, and what to do if there are any spills or any fires and things like that. We then talk about codes of practice. Codes of practice are sort of safe work practices, but they're the industry standards of those safe work practices. And they talk about some fairly common unsafe scenarios, like manual handling, how to lift heavy objects. There is a code of practice on how to manually handle materials. And the idea of having these national standards is to prevent injuries by educating people on a safe way to do the jobs. You should be familiar with signage. You've seen it many times before, you've learnt about it before, and you know what they do. But here's a really quick summary. If it's red, it's telling you about either a danger, a restriction, or something to do with fire. If it's blue, it's giving you an instruction that you must follow. Usually PPE signage is going to be blue because you must wear your mask at this time, or you must wear your goggles at this time. If it's yellow, it is a warning or a caution telling you that you are near something that is dangerous. It might be near an electrical hazard. It might be near a chemical hazard, whatever it might be. And if it's green, it's usually safety related in the sense that it's going to show you the safe way to get out of a building or how to find first aid. Okay? So green is usually safety related, yellow for cautions and warnings, blue for instructional signage, red for dangers, restrictions, and fire safety. You are familiar with PPE, and this is really simple to see in the workshops and very simple to apply to our industries. Cooper's Furniture, Hine Timber Mill, whichever business it is that you're studying, they are very familiar with how to use the correct PPE. This is fairly standard across the industry now, and there's not much confusion there. But you need to protect your eyes, your ears, your lungs, your feet, your head, your entire body. And you do that by applying the appropriate PPE for each individual scenario you're in. Loud machines will require you to protect your ears. Hand tools usually don't. Eye protection is required to protect your eyes, and depending on how much exposure your eyes have to some sort of dangerous scenario depends on how much protection you need. Consider that when you're using a drop saw, for example, safety goggles are suitable. But when you're using a lathe, they are not, and you need to wear a face shield because of the sheer volume of timber dust and timber particles flying at your face. So depending on the level of exposure will depend on the amount of PPE required. So there you have it, a really quick overview of health and safety in the timber products and furniture industry. Again, I've got another question there that I want you to respond to, and that's the impact of government legislation on work practices. That's now the end of our industry study preliminary. I hope there's been enough information in there to support you in your learning, and I look forward to seeing your presentation on your individual study into a business within the timber products and furniture industry. Thanks very much. Good luck.